are so fortunate in our community that we have people like Nicole Stott, who you just heard from, a true American hero and an innovator in space. Nicole, thank you so much for what you've done. You may not believe this, but we might not have had Nicole here if it wasn't for these old guys who, most of them, well, none of them are alive anymore, but they are what makes this community unique. Now, what's unique about us? We were out of the recession and had restored all the jobs by the end of last year, and this year we're going to add 80, 90, maybe 100,000 more jobs. We have a vibrant economy. We have something called entrepreneurs. When I grew up in New Jersey, if you said you were starting a business, it meant you were out of work. When I moved to Houston and actually started a business, and my parents came out to visit, my father didn't like to fly. He drove his big Cadillac with my mom. And I was looking out the window when they finally got to Houston, Texas, and drove up our driveway, and they got out of the car, and they had 4 bags of groceries. They didn't want to put their poor kids through having to feed them because Walter was out of work, right? So entrepreneurship is in our DNA. Augustus and John Kirby Allen. What a propitious day this was in 1836, because they were getting the last dollars together for the $5,000 that they would need tomorrow in 1836 to buy land around Ray's Bayou, Buffalo Bayou, and with that land would come Houston, Texas. Heck of a job. The 4th largest city in the country. You already know about the economy, I mentioned it. William Marsh Rice, another entrepreneur. He was a capitalist. He was an investor. Born in 1816. And I think you all know what William Marsh Rice did. Because of his largesse and his incredible success, he established Rice University. Rice University is celebrating its 100th anniversary. Now, what does this have to do with Nicole Stott? Johnson Space Center, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary today, is on land that Rice University donated. Where would Johnson Space Center be today if there was no Rice University? Where would so many of our most effective citizens be, in fact, our mayor be, if there hadn't been a Rice University? Monroe D. Anderson was born in the 1870s. Very successful, teamed up with Clayton, and they became cotton farmers, extraordinarily successful people. MD Anderson, of course, is the most noted cancer hospital in the country, if not in the world. And you may not know this, but MD Anderson was also the foundation stone for the Texas Medical Center. Where would Houston be without the Texas Medical Center? Jesse Jones, an amazing guy. He was a hotelier. He was a newspaper man, a variety of other things. During World War II, he's one of the most powerful men in America. And because of Jesse Jones, we have the Houston Ship Channel. The Houston Ship Channel is the largest foreign tonnage ship channel or port in the United States. It does over $200 million worth of tonnage every year. It employs about 800,000 people, and with the expansion of the Panama Canal, that's going to be. Can you imagine what Houston would be like today if it wasn't for the Houston Ship Channel, if that was just a little gully? Hugh Roy Cullen, one of the original Wildcatters. Hugh Roy Cullen stopped going to school in the 5th grade because when he was 12 years old, he had to make money, and he bagged groceries, I think, for something like $3 a week. He became a very prosperous entrepreneur himself in the oil business. He donated frequently to the University of Houston and took what would have been a small community college and turned it into a major college of education. University of Houston today teaches about 40,000 students a year in 300 subjects across many disciplines, some artistic, some technologists. They've recently established a new petroleum engineering program, which is one of the finest programs in the world about that. George and Herman Brown. Herman, 1892. George was born in 1898. We have a convention center named after George. You may not know that they built the Gulf Freeway. The Gulf Freeway was started in 1948, and it was the first freeway in the state of Texas, and it was an engineering marvel at the time. And it was completed just 60 years ago in 1952. On its second day of operation after completion, it carried about 28,800 passengers. Imagine how freely traffic would move if they only had 28,000 cars on it today. Now, here's something you might not know. In 1952, the mayor was concerned because there was no name for this interurban highway, and when people talked about it, it was a big deal, but they didn't know what to call it. So they sent out a prize for then an astounding $100 prize to name it. Now think for a minute. Forget that you know the name of it. What would you name a freeway that runs from Houston to Galveston? Back then, when Houston was not nearly as populous as today, how many people do you think submitted entries? 13,000 people submitted entries. And, well, who knows what the winning name was? The Gulf Freeway. Guess how many of those 13,000 got the Gulf Freeway name? One woman out of 13,000. A great freeway and an important part of Houston's entire freeway system growing up. Most of you don't know who Ed Rochelle was. Entrepreneurs come in all flavors. Ed Rochelle was a rancher and a cattleman, and he successfully built a ranch and cattle business that became quite successful. He was committed to education, and he created a foundation for the advancements of literature, arts, science, and education. Because of the foundation that came from the entrepreneurship of Ed Rochelle, several years ago, a conference was held called the Innovation Conference and Showcase, which brought together 60 or 70 entrepreneurs from this community around technology that without the benefit of Ed Rochelle and his largesse would not have happened, would not have been successful. And now it continues every year with 70 or so terrific new technologists talking about their latest technologies, October of every year, and a terrific panel of speakers. This year we're going to have Mike Coates back, another tied to Nicole. He's the director of Johnson Space Center, and leaders in finance, science, life science, energy, you name it, will be there. And that wouldn't happen if it hadn't been for Ed and him being a successful entrepreneur. George Herman. Boy, George Herman kind of pulls everybody back together. He was born in the 1840s. You all know Herman Hospital. His largesse created Herman Hospital, which is now, of course, highly recognized, has got divisions all over the region. And Herman Park. Herman Park ties a lot of things together as well. The zoo is in Herman Park, the Museum of Natural Science. Dan Duncan. Now we're getting into the modern era. Dan Duncan was born in 1933. We lost him way too soon, just 2 years ago. He's made major investments in the medical center. He and his wife, Jan, have donated over $250 million to it. Big investors in the museum. In fact, if you haven't been to the new Paleo Hall, I know you're going to be, some of you may be here in the SugarLand Museum. Go downtown, see the new Paleo Hall. It's named after the late Dan Duncan, a great guy, a wonderful entrepreneur. Now think about this. Dan Duncan was so poor that when he was a kid, when he was a young man, he worked hard to scrape together $10,000 in a trailer. And by the time he died, he was a multi-billionaire and the richest man in Houston. So there's nothing that anybody who's got an entrepreneurial spirit, who works really hard and has a little bit of luck, can't succeed. Bob McNair. You all think of him as the owner of the Texans, but Bob McNair started out as an entrepreneur in cogeneration. In fact, some of his first work was done in the New York Port Authority area and in New Jersey, where I was growing up. Bob has been a big donor to Baylor College of Medicine. You heard me talk about George Herman and Herman Park. My grandson, who's 2 years old, loves to go to the zoo. We go over to the McNair Elephant Habitat first thing in the morning, and we watch the keepers bathe the baby elephants, and my little grandson just goes nuts. And talk about magic, turns my heart just into absolute gold. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And if it wasn't for Bob McNair, this great football town wouldn't have an NFL team. Isn't that imaginable? Bob, thank you for what you've done for us. What a great guy. And we're going to have a heck of a year this year. Now, as we continue to folks that have been more recent entrepreneurs, Doug Irwin is a serial entrepreneur. His most recent entrepreneurial success was a company called The Planet, where he really rehabilitated some downtrodden space at the edge of downtown to turn beautiful space, sold that company. And you know, what does a really successful multiple entrepreneur do? He wants to help other entrepreneurs. So what he's done, he's established Red House Associates. That's his building. In fact, that was the headquarters of the first company he started as well. And now he helps other entrepreneurs, carefully evaluates the technologies, their entrepreneurship, their business plans, their management capability, sits down, advises them, puts his own money in a few of them, helps them raise money, gives them guidance, and he is now generating the next crop of entrepreneurs. Talk about the next crop of entrepreneurs. Michael Holthaus, amazingly successful with an IT-based company called Paranet. All right, very successful. But Michael cares about kids. In so many neighborhoods, unfortunately, the only entrepreneurship the kids see is guys with gold chains, tricked up automobiles selling products that aren't legal, and if they sold in the neighborhood of the school, would go to prison for 20 or 30 years. That's what they see as entrepreneurship. So Michael, several years ago, created a nonprofit called Prepared for Life and put together something called Lemon Day, which is now has been in its 7th or 8th year, where he helps kids open lemonade stands. And there's an entire package that kids go through with how to buy product, what to do with the product, how to pick a location, et cetera, et cetera. This last May, when they had Lemonade Day this last May, it was in 36 cities, and 150,000 registered kids opened lemonade stands. Now, each kid typically has a brother, sister, or a friend, and every lemonade stand is required to have a parent. So we've got 500,000 people, many in poor neighborhoods for the first time, having fun in entrepreneurship, which, unless you're trying to get by the health department in the city of New York, is legal almost everywhere else. Michael, thank you for what you do for kids everywhere, and wait till you see what happens next May. Now, entrepreneurs that are currently doing their entrepreneurship. This is Allison Lammy Stewart. Allison was an intern with the Houston Technology Center. A colleague of mine at the time, Tom Kraft. Again, entrepreneurs breed entrepreneurs. A proven entrepreneur in the medical device field recognized that she had entrepreneurial talent. Talk about William Marsh Rice. She's a Rice graduate. Tom teamed her up with a technologist which has a spectrometry optical device which enables you to scan a field and determine if there's anything that's not supposed to be there. Now, there needs to be some training of this device, but that means you can go to a plant like Allison is standing from over here. You can point it at the parts of the plant, and if there's anything that's coming out of that plant that's not supposed to, let you know. It could be used at airports. You notice that when you go to the airport, sometimes they put a little thing on your bag, rub it, do it, they check it, all this kind of thing. Someone could stand there holding this mass spectrometer device, optical device that she and this technologist have developed and determine right then and there. So it's got applications in food safety, plant safety, homeland security, you name it, it can do it. This could be hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion businesses if it isn't bought out, all to the benefit not only of the businesses that are created, and boy, does everywhere need jobs, but also to the benefit of our society. She was the winner of the King of Thailand Prize, the Karate Innovation Prize, a ETF award winner that goes on and on and on. She's right here in our community today. She's got a company of about a dozen people growing every day. You know, when it's windy outside, you get a pretty good energy development from wind energy. But as the sun comes up and it gets hotter and hotter, usually the wind goes down. When it comes to solar energy, when the sun goes down, the solar energy is not so good, but often the wind goes up. If it's cloudy and rainy, there's more wind. Joel Goldblatt is an entrepreneur behind a new something called Blue Energy Solar Wind. This product looks good. It looks like a piece of art, and whether it's windy or sunny or both, it generates power for us. This is a very special case. Yamil Jackson had a preemie in 2001 that was just under 2 pounds. And during Allison, they had to hand pump for 9 hours to keep Zachy alive. And she was so devoted to her son, and she realized that preemie babies have a terrible way to start life. And one of the problems is all the mechanics and mechanism of them is actually not very good for certain kinds of neurological and physical development. So they've done real studies to determine what happens if they can make the babies where their mothers can't be holding them, it's just not safe all the time, right? Where these premature babies that are so tiny can be. And so what she did is she started developing products, one like the one up here, which has now been proven to help early stage premature babies develop better and better and better. And so she's building a business. And I had a bunch of investors talking to her, and they said to her, can these devices be reused? And she said, oh yeah, they typically are, because when the baby's first born, they put the mother's hands in it so it's the smell of the baby. They wrap it up, they put the baby in it. But it's generally reused. And I think the investors were kind of thinking, oh, that's too bad. It'd be better for bacterial reasons they couldn't. So, and then one of them said, is there any reason why it's not reused? And I'll tell you how important this product. She said that when a baby dies, they leave it with the baby so that it can be buried with that around it. I mean, entrepreneurship makes an incredible difference. And whether you're being an entrepreneur making a ton of money, which is a really good thing, or whether you're making a social difference, that's a really good thing. Now, what does all that have to do with one of my favorite presidents, Teddy Roosevelt? I've told you about the successes and the differences entrepreneurs are making. And there's almost no city like Houston where we have the history of entrepreneurship. There's almost no city like Houston where so many people help out. At the Houston Technology Center, we have 300 people that volunteer their time to work with entrepreneurs. Well, the other thing is being an entrepreneur is hard. It often means you're not getting a salary. It means you're taking a risk, and it means you won't always succeed. And so I would never misquote a president of the United States. So I'm going to read this quote from Teddy Roosevelt, which I think he was applying to the political field or to the sports field, but this applies to the entrepreneur as well. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself for a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails daring greatly. We owe so much to our entrepreneurs. To those of you who are entrepreneurs out there, you inspire me. I thank you for what you do. For those of you who support entrepreneurs, you are supporting the future of our city. That is where the competitive difference is going to come from. It's not from adding another job at a major corporation, though we need the major corporations. We appreciate what they do for us. But it is because the entrepreneurs are creating the new jobs, the differences that make a competitive difference. And even something as small as an event like today wouldn't happen if it wasn't for an entrepreneur.